Hello, I'm Mizo. Today we're going to have a look at human reproduction. Somehow it is a very controversial subject.
Mizo is a right-wing thinker with considerably modest Indian cultural values. He has never held any government post in his life, nor is he associated with any organization. All his videos are original and creative. Please enjoy.
Now, sexual reproduction is actually very old. It goes back 2 billion years. So virtually when all the forms of living creatures in the world were single-celled animals or whatever you can call them, at that time they were sexually reproducing. As a fact, I was actually amazed to uncover. So sexual reproduction is nearly as old as life. So it actually makes a lot of sense. That is the reason why nearly all living creatures have sexual reproduction. In fact, sexual reproduction actually predates the separation of plants and animals, because both of them have similar ways of reproducing. In fact, the flowers have ovaries the same way as women have. Now, let's have a look at the higher creatures now. We are not going to look at single-cell animals. Now, the first real animal we could recognize were the fishes. When the first time the fishes evolved, they were the highest form of life. From these fishes evolved the reptiles. So the next animal we're going to have a look at are the birds. And the birds are the remnants of dinosaurs. So they are very highly evolved. And from there, we'll have a look at human reproduction. Now, before we go any further, let's take a pause here. The pause button is necessary because in the old days, study of science was considered witchcraft. So you were not allowed to study human reproduction. So what we knew about human reproduction was what actually used to happen to fetuses. So it is a bewildering thing, because some of the fetus would come out with very small, hardly human characteristics. Some would come out looking barely human. Some would come out dead. Some would come out alive. Some would come out they start alive and die in the end. So the humans basically didn't consider the fetus inside as a living creature, and that was actually fair enough, because that was the observation. Now, after the child was born, even then there were lots of problems. Some of the children couldn't breathe and simply die because of that, or some other children would die for other reasons. So generally, a child was not given an individual name till the first week. After the first week of being born, then generally they would be given an individuality. So basically the stand was, when the child is born, it is considered live, and then after that, when after the 6th day is given a name, and that was with the facts that was available at that time. Now the whole of religion weakened. As the whole of religion weakened, then a lot of questions they begin to ask. The problem with religion is they have their own theories, and the religion they end up saying that all the knowledge has already been given to us. There is no need for further knowledge. So they discourage further knowledge, research or whatever. And this is true of nearly all religions. So somebody comes along and gives you the entire truth. Obviously it is not. Now, when the whole of religion decreased, and there were a number of reasons because of that, then people began investigating these things. And when they began investigating these things, their capacity to investigate improved because of better instruments. Now, in the last 20 to 30 years, we have got a wide variety of instruments that can look into a human body and see things that couldn't be seen before. So now we have quite an accurate idea of how the human embryo evolves. But before going into the human embryo, let's have a look at fishes. Now, fishes, they basically lay eggs. Now, the egg inside has got the nutrition for the small fishlet to come out. Now, the idea being that all the stuff that the fishlet requires is inside the egg in the form of yolk and other things. Now, the female fish will lay the egg on a spot or someplace like that, sometimes in flowing streams, and then the male would spray sperm at that. Hopefully, the sperm will get to the egg and it fertilize the egg. Now, as soon as it is fertilized, rapid changes begins to occur, and in a couple of days, the egg yields a small. I'm not being very complicated out here, by the way. There are huge amount of complications. The egg yields a small fishling, and the fishling still has got yolk inside that. So this yolk is used as an energy source by the fishling. Now, when the fishling finishes the egg yolk, you can say now that the process of reproduction is complete and the fish has been born. Now, we have a look at now the bird eggs. Now, bird eggs are obviously much bigger, about say 1,000 times bigger, and they contain a lot of nutrition because they have to produce a much bigger chick and more complicated. Now, the thing about the most common bird we know is obviously the chicken itself. Now, the thing about the chicken egg is you can actually remove the shell and still hatch the egg without the shell. So, there will be a number of this is a simple school project, and you can see that in the beginning there is a small spot somewhere, and this spot is the spot from where the chick is hatching now. Now this spot becomes bigger, and then from there veins begin getting into the yolk. Now these veins get into the yolk to absorb the nutrition that is inside the yolk, so that the fetus can develop. Now you can see in the next stage that a small fetus has developed. Then this becomes bigger and bigger, and the yolk becomes smaller and smaller. In 21 days, generally speaking, the chicken is born, and when it's inside the shell, it breaks through the shell. So 21 days is the time in which the fish, the chicken is born from the egg. So now this is all outside reproduction. This is very uncertain way to reproduce, because now the chicken has got to sit on top of the eggs, and the amount of nutrition that the chicken can have is quite actually limited to the size of the egg. So you cannot have a big egg. The problem is with a big egg is the fetus inside has got to breathe through the walls of the egg. Now if this walls of the egg is too thick, then the amount of oxygen coming in and the amount of carbon dioxide going out is insufficient to support the fetus, even in its most elementary form. That's why it simply suffocates to death. So the size of an egg can grow about this big, and that is the size of an ostrich. So eggs bigger than that is not possible, because the shell has got to become too thick to support the egg, and a thick shell is not good enough. Now that is the reason why in the next stage of evolution the eggs began to get smaller and smaller, but they remain inside the mother's womb. This is the thing. The yolk has now more or less disappeared. Now we come to the human stuff. Now in humans what happens is the female has got a pair of ovaries, Now these ovaries contain about 200,000 possible eggs. These are proto eggs. These are not eggs exactly, but this is limited to 200,000. Now when the female child is inside her mother's womb, that's the time in which the eggs are born. Now please get the thing very clear. When the female child is born, it already has the total supply of eggs it will need for the rest of its life. After being born, no further eggs are possible. Now these 200,000 eggs that is inside the ovary is taken out one at a time, and this is when the female matures. That's called puberty. When the female matures, then hormones begin acting and her body begins to develop. Then the uterus is formed and all these things are characteristics of the female is formed now. Once the characteristics of the female is formed, then the eggs begin coming out one to one in a 28-day cycle, generally speaking. Now in this 28-day cycle, one of the eggs is chosen from the ovary and then is given treatment by hormones and stuff like that. It becomes a bit big, and then it resides in the ovaries and waiting for a sperm to come up. Now the human male doesn't have a store of sperms. The human male manufactures the sperms, and and one go they can release even 2 million sperms. That is the system. So now these sperms, they travel up the vagina and they try to mate with the egg. The moment one of the sperms reach the egg, then the egg closes itself to other sperms. Now when the sperm enters into the egg, it releases DNA, and this DNA now interacts with the female DNA to form the first cell. The first cell is size of the egg. Now this is not a living creature, because the egg now has got to somehow embed itself in the uterus wall. Until it does that, it cannot live. So even a fertilized egg can simply pass through and not find some anchor somewhere. So it is not a living creature. So those people who say that life forms at conception are not being accurate. Now after this egg has been fertilized, it begins to multiply, and begins to multiply very fast. One becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, so on and so forth. But at a certain point they begin to specialize. That is, some of the eggs will become some of the cells will become the top part of the body, some will become the limbs, stuff like that. So, but even at that point, it has not actually become a living creature. Now, this has got to embed itself inside the wall. As soon as it touches the wall, it goes into the wall, the uterus wall, and once it goes into the uterus wall, it becomes sort of a pimple, but is still separate from the mother. Now the connections, the blood connections are being made at this point. This is within hours of conception. It's just a matter of hours of conception that this is going to happen. Then it comes out as a small pimple, and then it is able to absorb. Now once this happens, the female stops ovulating, then stops further eggs from coming out of the ovaries, and there's a monopoly of this particular egg. Fertilized egg gets a monopoly of the mother's womb now. If 2 eggs are fertilized, then you get a twin, and that's a different story altogether. But basically speaking is that once the egg has embedded itself into the mother, it goes deep into the mother, forms a pimple, and then starts coming out from there. The mother stops ovulating. No more eggs are now coming out till the child is born. After the child is born, maybe a couple of months, then the fresh eggs begin to come out. Now this is a interesting thing. Once the whole thing is made, So the pimple begins getting bigger and bigger. This is a matter of days now, and you can see a small fetus forming. But here, up to this point, it is quite like the fish fetus and the chicken fetus. It's not much of a difference here. The difference is in the way the new organs form or the old organs dissolve. There's a small difference there, but they are quite similar at this point. However, the divergence occurs is that the human fetus now concentrates on the brain. The brain forms 50% of the fetus in its initial stages. So there's small blood circulation system set up, which you can see is important for the nutrients to flow right through the body. But even when the blood circulation system is set up, I don't consider it a living thing, because if you go back to the hen, you can see that the blood circulation system is set up through the yolk in this case, but it is not a fully fledged individual. So at this point, it is not an individual. However, as the brain becomes bigger and bigger, the brain activity begins to start. Now when the brain activity begins, that's an electrical activity. The activity of the brain is basically an electrical activity, and this can be detected from outside. Now when the brain begins to really function, then this activity can be assessed from outside by a thing called EEG. You can see that there is a brain and the brain is working. Why I'm concentrating on the brain? Because the modern definition of a dead person is a person whose brain activity has stopped. So by taking that into account, the baby now becomes an individual when his brain activity has begun, and you can detect the brain activity from outside. From here on, the baby actually has become an individual, and the fetus has become an individual. Now it is the size of it might be that big, like size of a pea, and in a couple of weeks, similar to the hen, it becomes a fully formed human being. This hardly way is just if you take a human baby and look at it under the microscope, it will become very small and look exactly like that. So the idea being that the moment you can detect the electrical activity of the brain, the baby is now a living thing. It is now an individual, and if you abort it, that should be considered murdered. Now, this occurs within 21 days of conception. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that. Now, if you were to, this is my deadline, that the moment the brain cells are active and you can detect the electrical activity, the child is born. From there, it is just a matter of size increase and various organs being formed. Obviously, after that, it is sort of a baby inside the mother's womb. It is not a fetus anymore in that way. And then it develops inside the mother's womb, and it comes outside, is still developing. A human being develops till the age of 30. So there is no way you can draw a line after that. Once the brain activity starts, then the other development processes begin, and where the development processes begin, there is no way to say that at this point the human being is fully formed, because the changes take place up to the age of 30. After that, things begin to deteriorate, and in fact the reverse process begins to happen. With this is Mizo signing off, pointing out to you that inside the mother's womb, the child has been born, and those people who say the child is born outside the thing is the medieval stuff, when we didn't know what is happening. But because now we know what is happening, I think we should change our views on this subject. This is Mizo signing on.